Week 17 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers I would start this week. The first kicker, Harrison Mevis of the Los Angeles Rams. So Mevis, I've been saying for weeks now, anytime you got a kicker on a high-powered offense, he's just going to find his way into points. And that's exactly been the case with Mevis for 4 out of 5 games with 9 or more fantasy points for him now. Week 13 at the Panthers, 4. Week 14 at the Cardinals, 9. Week 15 versus the Lions, 12. Week 16 at Seattle, 13. So this week a slam dunk matchup at the Atlanta Falcons. Monday Night Football indoor game, which is always a plus. And this Falcon team, they're giving up tons of points to kickers this season, 6 most. So we know this Ram team, after blowing a 16-point lead and losing to the Seahawks last week, I think they're going to take it out, obviously, on the Atlanta Falcons, put a lot of points on the board, and Mevis will be a big part of it. And he's been a good kicker ever since they signed him early in the season, where Joshua Carty was shaky, and they had to cut him loose, and it was a good trade-off for them this season. Next kicker, Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Another solid season it's been for Chase McLaughlin, and the last 4 out of 5 games, double-digit fantasy points for McLaughlin. So this week, a good matchup at the Miami Dolphins, a defense that can't stop anyone, and teams that are going up and down the field majority of the season at this Miami Dolphin team. We just saw the Bengals, who scored no points in the Week 15 game versus the Ravens, go out there and put 45 points up on the board, even though they're a great offense, but still to go from 0 and then 45 last week versus Dolphin defense, they're giving up points. And also this Buck offense stalls out decently in the red zone. Week 14 versus New Orleans, 9. Week 15 versus the Falcons, 11. And Week 16 at the Panthers, 10 fantasy points. I think McLaughlin, once again, should be good weather in Miami. He's a good weather kicker, obviously playing his games in Tampa. And 55 yards isn't a problem for him. So this week, he's definitely a start. For me, next kicker, Jason Myers of the Seattle Seahawks. So Myers, he was on some run where he had 6 games in a row with double-digit fantasy points, and that streak came to an end in Week 16, was only 2 extra points for him in that ball game versus the Rams, where obviously they went for 2 twice and converted twice with the Seattle Seahawks team. So this week, a decent matchup at the Carolina Panthers. I know they give up the 11th least amount of fantasy points to kickers on the season, but like I said, Myers, he was on some run for 6 weeks in a row, and then last week a little bit fluky. So this Seattle offense, they do stall out at times, and this week at the Carolina Panthers, where their defense has been solid of late for the most part, I think they're going to have to settle for field goals. So the last couple weeks here for Myers, Week 13 versus Minnesota, 19. Week 14 at the Falcons, 14. Week 15 versus the Colts, 24. And Week 16, like I said, versus the Rams, 2 fantasy points. So this week, it's a bounce-back game, I believe, for Jason Myers. And this Seattle team is putting points on the board weekly, and Myers has been the number 1 kicker this season. Next kicker, Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys. So Aubrey, he's having another great season, is Brandon Aubrey. He's been the second best kicker this season, in my opinion, behind Jason Myers. And the last 3 out of 4 games, he's had double-digit fantasy points, where in Week 16, he didn't do much in that one, was Aubrey. So Week 13 versus the Chiefs, 12. Week 14 at the Lions, a big ball game, 23. Week 15 versus Minnesota, 16. And Week 16 versus the Chargers, 5 fantasy points. So this week, good matchup on paper at the Commanders. 10th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. They can't stop anyone, is his Commander DST. And we know Brandon Aubrey, 60-plus yards. He's done it many times this season. Hasn't been a problem for him. And also this Cowboy offense, the last couple weeks, the numbers have dropped off a little bit, where there'll be more opportunities for Aubrey, even in a good matchup at the Commanders. So this week, after a down week for Aubrey, still a kicker I have confidence in, and a start in the final kicker, Cam Little of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another kicker with a big boot. We saw him in the preseason, hit a 70-yarder, and we saw him in Week 9 at the Raiders, hit a 68-yard, the record longest field goal of all time. So the last 4 out of 5 weeks, double-digit fantasy points, it's been for Cam Little. And this is a high-powered Jacksonville offense now, 11-4 in the season. They're putting a lot of points on the board. And this week, it's a great matchup at the Colts. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And obviously, it's an indoor game. You can't beat that. Obviously, this time of year in December, where the weather, the whole East Coast is freezing. So the last few games here for Cam Little, Week 13 at Tennessee, 6. Week 14 versus the Colts, 11. Week 15 versus the Jets, 12. And Week 16 at Denver, 11 fantasy points. So this week with a good matchup at the Colts, we had good success in Week 14 with 11 fantasy points. I think he goes out there once again. He's going to get some decent opportunities. We know he's got a big boot, and he's a start this week. So that's a few kickers I would start for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.